The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Listener or viewer discretion is advised. This podcast episode is for educational purposes. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast does not reflect the views of our employers. Where applicable, any allegations are alleged until proven in a court of law.
Thank you so much for watching this upcoming episode. Please don't forget to like, follow, and share.
Hey, Ousters. I know it's been a minute, but we are so happy to be back. Our first episode of the season is going to be a very heavy episode, but we're starting off with a welcome back and a very, very big thank you to all our Ousters, our new Ousters, our day one Ousters. Thank you for tuning in. This episode here is a very special episode. And like I said earlier, it is going to be a little on the heavy side. So, T.
Yes. So, as many of you know, and if you're listening to it today is the anniversary of September 11th. And this day has impacted so many lives over the years. And whether you lost someone on that day or you lost the way that you live, it changes us. So we were very, very lucky to not have lost anyone that day. But for many of us, it changed how we live, some for the better or mostly for the better. And today we wanted to share stories from people like us who were very, very blessed and fortunate to not have been impacted by a loss of life, but feeling that this tragic moment in our history, it changed us in some way. And that is what you will hear today. It's different from what we normally do, and we hope that you like it, but it's a very somber day for us. It's a day that we can comfortably say we remember the emotions that come with it, because it was a really big thing to happen in our lifetime as young adults. And it stays with us. So, without further ado, in remembrance of September 11th, please continue to watch. We appreciate you.
On September 11, 2001, a terrorist group forever changed our country. 343 firefighters, 72 law enforcement, 2,562 U.S. citizens, totaling 2,977 people who lost their life stemming. How it changed us varies based on our individual experiences, and here are stories from people who were impacted by the day.
Hey y'all, how you doing? My name is George Cole, and I'm happy to be doing this video for the House podcast. I've been asked to give a recollection of my story of what happened on September 11th, 2001. It's a little difficult to do so for some of the things we went through on that day, but I'm gonna do my best. Like at the time, I worked for one of the major delivery companies, so I'm going to work, getting your truck loaded, head out on the road. And I worked in a town, I delivered in a town called Maplewood, New Jersey, which is about 15 to 20 minutes away from New York City by train. And many of the residents in Maplewood worked in New York. So I'm going ahead making my deliveries. I'm focusing on my job, focusing on the road. So I'm oblivious, kind of sort of oblivious to what's going on around me. And then you start to notice people outside, more people hugging, more people talking. But like I said, I'm doing my job, I'm riding along. And back then we didn't have all the communication that we have today. You didn't get cell phone alerts. Everybody didn't have, text messaging. You weren't able to pull up websites quickly on your phone. You couldn't listen to the radio, whatever, through your phone. So you had to actually see something or hear something to know what was going on. So I'm doing my deliveries, and this is I go to 195 Maplewood Avenue. Now, 195 Maplewood Avenue at the time had a business on the second floor that did something with finance, stockbroking and all that. And these guys were high roads. Whenever you went there, I always had music going. They had 10, 12 screens around the offices. They had a chef in there that was cooking. So they were having a good time, having fun. So there was always noise as soon as you open the door to go upstairs. On 9/11, I open the door. It's quiet. I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking maybe, they're not there. Maybe somebody forgot to lock the door. I'm like, it's never quiet there. So I go up the stairs and I look, and they're all 10, 15 guys are all looking toward the far wall, looking at the biggest TV screen in the room, and they're all quiet. And I walk in, and the one guy about nearest the door looks at me and says, "Yo, look at this." And I turn around and look, and one of the towers is falling. Now, I imagine you, I have no idea what's going on. I've been delivering. I had no idea what was going on. And I walk into this room, and one of the twin towers is falling. And they're grown men, and they're crying, some quiet. Nobody knows what to do. And as I learned later, many of them had friends and family that worked over there. So this was a personal for them. And one of the guys, for some reason, like, do you want to stay and watch the rest of this? And like, I wanted to know what was going on, but now I'm all confused. I want to get back to my truck because my cell phone's in my truck. I want to call my wife because my wife works in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which by train is like 10, 12 minutes from New York City. So I was like, no, I gotta call my wife. So I run back downstairs. I gotta remind you now that cell phone technology back then was horrible. It wasn't unusual to drop a call, anything like that. It wasn't unusual to have trouble getting a call to go through. And this is in the best of times, let alone during a national disaster. So I'm trying to call my wife, and because the towers that fell and things were going on, cell phone use was horrible. It was almost on you. It was very hard to communicate by cell phone as the towers fell. So now I'm nervous about my wife because I know she's like 10, 12 minutes away. And mind you couldn't text back then either because they charged per text, and it took you forever to send a text message. So I'm going about my business, and then somehow my wife got through to me, and it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. She just tells me that they could see the smoke, they could see the debris, and mind you, she didn't know what was going on. They just know there was this big debris cloud and everything, and they were being sent home for the day, which was a relief to me. At least I know my wife was going home. I just told her that if you can, contact me when you get home. So now, when I hear anything from the job, anything, so I'm going on with my job. I continue working, and to me, this is the thing I remember most about 9/11. I go to a house on a Maryland Road, 16 Maryland Road to be exact. I still remember the address. And this lady, she got something every day. So I walk up before I even get to the door. She opens the door and she comes out crying and just gives me a hug. Like, she just gives me a hug, and then she backs up and she says, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but my husband worked in the Twin Towers." So I hugged her again, and she was very upset. And we stand there because I don't know what to do. I honestly don't. So I continue on working. I believe we worked the whole day. They didn't call us in. Like I said, nobody really knew what was going on. Through the course of the day, I hear that the second tower fell. Then you hear that there are a total of 4 airplanes that crashed, one in Pennsylvania and one into the Pentagon. People are panicking. We don't know is something wrong with the air traffic control system? Is something happened with all the planes that crashed? And but after you get past 2, now people are panicking. They're one of the planes that just gonna drop out of the sky. People are scared. I finally get back to the job, and now we have TV screens in there. Now I'm seeing more and more what's going on. And I'm like, I gotta go because I still have to get my daughter, who stays with my in-laws, up in Orange, New Jersey. So I have to get in the car, drive there. Traffic is a nightmare because you have people coming back from New York and everything. Everybody's trying to get out. It's just traffic's a nightmare everywhere. Get up to Orange, get my daughter from my in-laws, who's only 2 years old. So, thank God she has no recollection of what was going on. It takes me about an hour to get back home, which normally takes me 20 minutes. My wife, she's like at the front door, at the panicking. We finally get home, hug her, this and that, and she's telling me what she saw across the river, smoke, the debris, how her and her coworkers are panicking. And we live in Hillside, New Jersey, which is only like by train 15, 20 minutes away from New York City. So we can see smoke, we can see debris. We know of people that work in New York City, but like I said, news is moving slowly. And we, like everybody else, is watching TV, trying to find out what's going on. Like, what's happening? Is it, why are planes dropping out of the sky? Why are planes crashing into buildings? And I guess we found out later on. And I remember none of us went to work the next day. Work was canceled, especially for me because we planes couldn't fly, so we couldn't get our stuff to deliver. And the news is coming in about the terrorist situation, this and that. People are mad. People are angry. And I think about 9/11. After the day after 9/11 is for a little while there was no black, there was no white, there was no brown, there was no yellow, there was no red, there was no Democrat, there was no Republican. It was didn't matter what religion you were. For a little bit of time there, we were all Americans. Everybody was hugging, everybody was crying, everybody wanted some get back, if I'm being honest. Then my wife was like, out of the blue, she's like, yo, do you think they're gonna call you back? I said, call me back. She's like, call you back up. And during the trauma and the grief of what we had been going through, it never occurred to me that I was former National Guard and I hadn't been out that long. My wife was scared they would call me back up because they were sending the National Guard to airports or just something like that, and there was talk of going to attack somebody, anybody, to find out who did this. And she was scared that I would get called back up. And thankfully, I was not called back up, but I remember going through that time, and me and a few of my friends who had been in the National Guard, we were very nervous about that. We didn't know what was going on. We were anxious. Well, all of America was anxious, especially those of us that were not far from New York City. I mean, we were seeing, like, ad nauseum all the videos of the people covered in a white dust coming back. And matter of fact, a guy that literally lives across the street from me, he was there, and he had to walk back through that. Took him about 2 days to get back home from New York City. And he was telling me his story just the other day, and how harrowing it was for him and what he went through. And I know other people that got stuck. Another guy got stuck over there. He remembers being covered in a white dust, and thank God, as of right now, they're not sick. And it was hard. But like I said, for those few days after, we were all Americans. People were united. People want to get back. And I don't want to make this, I do want to end this on a good note. I don't want to go out and be depressing about this. Remember I told you about the lady at 16 Maryland? I went to her house to deliver. Well, it turns out her husband was running late and never made it to work. So he survived. And when she told me that, I felt good about that. I was happy for that, because that was at least some good news to come out of this situation. Several people from Maplewood died in 9/11. They have a monument to those people. Several people in nearby South Orange, New Jersey, died in 9/11. A lot of people in New Jersey worked in New York, worked at the World Trade Centers. So that was a bleak time over here. It was a scary time. One of the few times in my life where I've actually been scared, because we had no idea what was going on, no idea what was going to happen. So that was 9/11 for me. I hope my story helps you guys. I hope it enlightens you guys. Goodbye and God bless.
So I know exactly where I was at and what I was doing when this tragic event took place. I think, like most people, I can't forget it. And I thought that after so many years have passed, that me talking about it wouldn't be as hurtful, but it still is. Um, yeah. So at the time, I was a correctional officer in the state prison, and I was doing one of my many morning rounds trying to make sure that the schedule that the inmates that was supposed to be gone were gone or getting ready to go, and making sure what nothing going on that wasn't supposed to be going on. And as I was doing around, as I was doing the round, I walked by the TV that was in the day room and I saw it. And me being like really into movies, even now, when I first saw it, I really did think that they was doing some type of movie preview, that they was advertising this new movie, upcoming movie that was going to be released. And so I looked at it and I was like, oh, when I finish doing this round, I'm going to come back and take a peek. And so I did the round and I came back and it looked like the TV was still in the same spot, because it was. And then I seen that it was the news. And I stood there for a minute, like in shock, in denial, like I didn't know what to make of it. Um, New York had been my home for a good portion of my childhood, and I remember um, going there as a kid, going to the very top and looking through those binoculars. And I was in shock. I was in denial. Like, it couldn't really be. And I think in my shock, I think I said it. I know I said it out loud because one of the inmates came by and was like, no, it's real. And after I got over like the initial shock, the next thing that hit was family, because I had family that I knew um, was in the area. And I remember trying to get through. Well, I had to take it back, because the environment that I worked in, we didn't have our cell phones on the unit with us. So I remember calling one of my supervisors and I was like, I have to get off this building. I have to find out if everybody is okay or not okay. And my supervisor he came and he released me, and I went to my car, and cell phones really was not a really big thing. I mean, it was a thing, but I don't it wasn't definitely not like it is now and definitely not the same capabilities that we have now. Um, and I went to the car and I grabbed my cell phone and I'm starting to dial and I can't reach anybody. I can't get through. As a matter of fact, if I remember right, it was everything was busy, 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 like bong, 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 like everything was busy. And I remember because your breaks are only but so long, and I was just relieved just for a couple of minutes, and I had to get back. And I remember walking back into that building and hearing that door slam and still not knowing. And my supervisor at the time, we were like that was like one of my best friends at the time, and everybody thought we had a thing going on, but we really didn't. And when they did start with the rumor, I kind of went with it. With his permission, I kind of just went with. I was like, "Yeah, that's my baby daddy," but that's beside the point. So I was like visibly upset, and he could tell because we had been friends for a very long time, and he was like, "They're gonna be okay. Everything's okay. Can't anybody get through right now? So don't think the worst." Um, and then by the time I got back to my unit, that's when I saw that a lot of people were trying to get through to family. Everybody was trying to get through to family, and they was saying, text instead, because some the text messages seemed to be getting where they needed to go. And so as soon as I was relieved and got another break, um, I did start texting, and I did find out that everybody on my end was okay, but I hurt and I was so just still grieving because that was my home. That's where I grew up. And even though my immediate family that I knew of was okay, just all the people that wasn't okay. And that that day, what happened on 9/11, it changed my view. I was I was young, adult but young, and it changed my safe space because for so long I mean, yeah, like we know it's crime. We know that things happen, right? But I just was still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that this really happened. I even got angry because I realized that not everybody thinks that my country, this country, America, is really great. When I saw that there was some people that were celebrating, like I would never think to celebrate that happening to anybody's home, anybody's country. Like I was taken back, and I guess my naiveness had me confused and in denial about that too. Like, that day, like I said earlier, even me talking about it now, it's like, wow, this really happened. And the loss, the damage, the heroes of that day, and the heroes after that day. Yeah, that day definitely changed so many lives. And it definitely changed how I look at life and my surroundings and what I thought was safe.
So the question was, where was I at 9/11 during the terrorist attacks, and how did I, what was my feelings about it at that time? Actually, it's interesting where I was at. I was in prison at the time of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I was in prison. In fact, I think I might have been in SEG. This is where my recollection is kind of blurry. It's kind of faulty. I remember, I can't remember if I was in SEG or actually in population or whatever the circumstance, but I remember someone mentioned it. Someone said a plane had just hit the tower, had hit one of the towers. And, of course it was shock. What are you talking about? The plane hit the towers. What somebody, was it, what happened was the question. Did, the pilot go off a tandem, something with the towers, or, was it an accident? Pretty much. Was it an accident, or what was going on? And then someone was like, well, I don't know, but it's people jumping out the building, and it's all type of chaos and everything. And so this is where my recollection, because I believe I remember seeing the second plane hit the other building. For some reason in my mind, now I don't know if it was I saw it later or if I actually saw it happen, but for some reason I believe I saw it happen. And I don't know if we put a mirror, because if you're in prison and you have bars. I was in Menard State Prison in Illinois, and I was behind. It was in SEG, so we had bars where I was on the side that I was on. I think I was on the side where they have the death row, and so I stuck my mirror. And this is what I think I remember happening. I stuck my mirror out to see what was going on, because when you're in SEG for a certain amount of time, you can start getting privileges back. So I'm looking over at the TV of the gentleman next door, and that's when we saw the second plane. And I think at that point in time, people started mentioning the fact that it was a terrorist attack. And what I was more concerned about myself being in prison, because in my mind I was thinking that in prison, if you're in prison and something like this happens, that pretty much they'll just come and kill you because you're in prison and you don't have any rights. You're not a citizen, and so they'll just come and kill you, get rid of you, because they don't want you to escape. They don't know if you're a mass murderer. They don't know what you are. So anyway, we're thinking about that. I think one of the COs, the correctional officers, is walking down the hall or something, and so I asked, hey man, what happens, in the case of an emergency, something like this, where it's a terrorist attack, and there's like, martial law or whatever the case may be. And he says to me in response, he says, what we would do is we would come down with a gun and we'll put a bullet in your head. That's what he said. So that was my experience, 9/11. Yeah.
Hi, this is Tanya, one of the co-hosts for Alice Now podcast, and my experience on September 11th. Despite our family being extremely blessed and very, very lucky that we were not impacted by a loss of life from that day, as a New Yorker who lived 34 years in New York before finally moving away, I still get emotional around that time. And it's still something that I can't fully understand, because it's not something like, I don't understand why organizations would do something like that. Like, I don't know anyone who has in my circle that has that kind of hate in their heart to cause an event like this that basically changed our way of living. It changed the news cycle. It changed that news cycle. And it's a weird thing. And I find it a weird thing to explain to children, because how do you explain something like this when we as adults don't even understand it? So last year, when I finally talked about it with my son, it was a hard thing to explain. And on September 11th, I worked in Manhattan, and I was a subway rider. I was a commuter, so I took the train every morning to work from Queens. And that morning I was running late for work. And what I know now that I didn't know then is, I was on the train. My train stopped before it got to my stop. So it was kind of stuck in the tunnel before my station, and it had stopped for a period of time. And I didn't know why. But I just remember looking at my watch saying, oh man, I wasn't late. But once it stops in the tunnel, I was like, okay, I'm going to be late. And it was there for, I don't know for how long. I don't remember that part. But when the train finally started moving, I get to my stop and had to make time for breakfast because, the girl can get some food. And so I stopped to, and there was a concourse that I had to walk through to get to my job. And I stopped at the place that I normally would stop to get breakfast, coffee and whatnot. And it was quieter than usual because I was late. And the morning rush for people who were on time had passed, but here I am. So, I requested whatever I wanted. I think it was a bagel. I don't remember. And, I'm looking at the TV screen, and I asked the guy, what happened here? And he said a plane had hit the World Trade Center. So, I was more in that morning, I was more focused about, I'm late, I need to get to work. And I was like, wow, how does something like that happen? And in between, so, I finally get to my concourse, I get in the elevator bank, and I'm up on my floor. And, the way that our office was situated, it was like a big square with elevator banks in the middle. And then I had to go to like security in a long corridor where they did some sort of security checks, which I'm not gonna, I don't. So I'd have to go to this corridor through the security section before I could get into the office where I worked. And I get through that part, and then I walk down the corridor. I'm passing some of my coworkers, and their look on their faces was very. I didn't understand why everyone was so like this. But as I turn the corner and I walk down the corridor to get to my workstation, I see in a building, which was, I believe it was the second World Trade, the second tower. I didn't know what I was looking at. I really couldn't comprehend or understand what it was, but all I saw was this was the second tower. There was a hole in the building, and it was like a fireball. It was like I was just seeing this hole with a fireball, if that makes sense. And I now recognize that was the second, like I had just missed seeing that second plane hit, and I'm grateful for it. Because I worked on the 34th floor in a building that had a beautiful view of both buildings. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of fear in that moment, and trying to reach family, but the cell phones really wasn't working. So that we were using cell phones back then. This was kind of early on before it started to become more mainstream. And we couldn't get in contact with them because the cell lines were just completely blocked. And there was this sense of, okay, well, what do we do here? Like, it was deemed that it would be safer for us to ultimately stay where we were. And, after like the initial shock, there was this kind of, and actually being able to speak to one of my sisters and just letting her know that I was safe. And she managed to get through to me. She managed to get through on the work phone lines because she had a home phone. And that's when she told me that another plane, that's when she told me about the plane in Pennsylvania where she was, because she lived there at the time. I didn't know about the plane in DC, but it was very surreal. And that whole moment, it was just, the whole day was surreal. At some point there was this sense of, like, what do we do? What do we do? And, I just kind of, at some point I was like, I needed to kind of get away from, because I worked in an office that was kind of in an area that was sheltered from the rest of the offices. And, I just went to my workstation and I was trying to just do something. And I started to hear like some of my coworkers gasping. And when I went outside, I could see like the buildings were gone. And it was the first tower was gone. At that point, I don't remember what his role was, but our supervisors was like, well, we think it'd be safer if everyone just left. But, train service wasn't working. So there was this, everyone just walked. We walked, and it wasn't like we just walked. It's a strange thing to see, but say what you want about New Yorkers. People always depict it as if, it's a horrible place. And sometimes it can feel that way because it's so busy. But on that day, we really knew somehow there was this moment or this feeling of togetherness, even though there was, I felt very confused. I know a lot of people were confused that day, but there was this feeling of togetherness as we all walked towards our respective homes, over the bridges. And, later when I ultimately got home, it was, I still don't get it. I still don't understand it. And, I was alone just trying to process what had just happened. I was just glued to the news. Like, what is this? Like, what is this? What is this? How did this happen? And the part that makes me so grateful is, my 3 of my childhood friends, we all lived in Queens, and they were just knocking on my door, and Marilyn, Yadi, Michelle, we were just together, like just glued to the news, like trying to understand, like, what is this? So even though it felt, confusing, I had my best gal pals with me to where we were able to support each other in something that we just didn't understand. I recognize how lucky I am and how lucky we are as a family, because there were so many people who lost loved ones that day, first responders. And even still, I get like, oh, maybe I don't have the right to, I don't have the right to feel this sense of loss and sadness when it comes to it, because, hey, we were lucky. I still do. Say what you want about where we are now as a country, but this is still my country, and it shouldn't have happened. But on that day, or the days after, I was changed in the sense that I felt for a very long time that I was, I don't know, how do I put this? I was just kind of coasting through life, but I wasn't living it. I'm not sure if that would make sense, but I just felt like I was just coasting and just doing the things that we needed to do to kind of, pay rent, pay bills. But it changed my life, because somewhere in that I decided that, fuck this, I'm going to start living life. And I did. Some of it wasn't the best, but it was life-changing, and life-changing for a lot of people. And when you consider, hey, bud, how it changed our whole country, and yes, son, all of those things led to that little guy right there opening the door. Because instead of just coasting, I said, no, I'm going to go ahead and experience. And I did, with some missteps, mishaps, whatever mistakes, which brought me to here. So that was my experience. And that's what I learned. And that's how it changed me.
September 11th, 2001 is the very first day I ever remember despair. That is the first day I've ever experienced hopelessness and helplessness. I was in college at Hollins University, and I worked at the Career Development Center, and we had a kind of a custom. In the morning, the ladies who were in charge would watch Good Morning America. And so I would be across the hall kind of gathering materials for the day, and the TV would be going in the main office of the Career Center. And I heard Miss Carolyn, who was my supervisor, I heard her gasp, like, and I could hear it from across the hall. And I went over to see what was going on, and I couldn't see the TV screen, but I could see her face. And so I was just looking at her, and I remember the look on her face was like she was looking at a ghost. And she was teary-eyed, and I looked at the TV just in time to see the second tower start to fall. And I remember wondering what movie the Good Morning America, what trailer, what is this trailer for? And then I quickly realized that it was not a movie, that it was an attack, and I was experiencing real-time reactions from seasoned anchors. And I remember Miss Carolyn crying. I remember the other women gathering in that office, and I remember some other people like that worked on that hall coming because they knew we watched Good Morning America. And I remember them coming, gathering in the office to see what was happening. Classes were canceled that day, and we had a campus-wide gathering in the chapel, and there was a lot of support for the students, but we also realized that in that time that we all needed to be supporting one another. And so that is exactly what we were doing. I remember one of my friends is from New York, and I remember her just screaming out and wailing because she could not reach her family. She hadn't heard from them. She didn't know if they were okay. Thankfully, they were and are. There were also a lot of people who had family and loved ones living and working in Washington, D.C. So it was just a lot of unknowns, a lot of emotions on that day. And I remember it was also one of my professor's birthday. And I was excited to be able to go to class that day because we were going to have cupcakes from his wife. And I remember seeing him the next day, and he said, if anyone still needs a cupcake, I still have cupcakes available. And there was something beautiful about the opportunity to still celebrate life while grieving the enormous amount of death that had taken place on this soil in my lifetime. I will never ever forget that day, that season. A lot has changed, and a lot will continue to change in light of that.
thank you so very much for watching this episode. We know it was different from our normal podcast episode, but we wanted to do it in this different style where it felt more like a documentary because this day is a very memorable day and it sticks with us. And we wanted to capture that within this episode. And that's why we did this episode different. So we hope that you liked it. And there's something I want to say, I just don't know how to say it. Sometimes we as New Yorkers or people who live in these big city areas, like this is something that was really big for us. And I think somewhere as we started this project, we realized that maybe other people didn't feel that intense sadness when it comes to this, because it really is for a lot of us. But we hope that this is a reminder for people that this happened and that it's something that we shouldn't ever forget, because there's a lot of people, everyday citizens, everyday citizens, yes, first responders, like the fire department and the transit authority, police officers, like that's such a large loss of life, not just for public servants, but just citizens. And it's something that we should be reminded of so that ideally something like this won't happen again.
I talked about it in when I was recanting what happened, that even now it's still, I have that moment of like, wow, that really happened. That happened here. It happened to us. It happened to our safe place. And I mean, um, just listening to other people share their stories and the fact that they did that for us, we are very, very grateful. We're grateful to our listeners, and as always, thank you so much for joining and listening to our humble podcast. And this, all of our episodes are important to us, but this also very important episode to us. And time is something that you cannot get back. And the fact that you took time out of your busy schedules and your daily lives to be here with us for this episode, we cannot thank you enough. If this episode has not showed us anything else, it showed us how the unexpected can happen, and that life is valuable and you just never know. So each day, we appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks so much.